Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you could join us for our webinar series today. My name's Tamara Bingham-Noyes. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Center for Change. We're here with Dr. Heather Finley, and Heather's going to introduce herself shortly, but I'd like to go over just a few things quickly, some housekeeping items that you need to know before we launch into the webinar itself. As you can see on your screen, a copy of the PowerPoint is in the handout section of the toolbar. So if you click on that handout section, you'll see the PowerPoint there. You're more than welcome to view it or print it if you'd like so that you can follow along if you need to. You're more than welcome to do that. In that same handout section of the toolbar is a copy of the post-test. Please keep in mind that this post-test is for reference only. In order to obtain continuing education credit, you must take the online post-test, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But you're more than welcome to take a look at the post-test that's in the handout section and keep an eye as we go through the webinar so that you can answer those questions when it's time after the webinar. You're welcome to submit questions in the questions section of the toolbar. We'll try to get to a few of those at the end of the webinar. I'll keep an eye on those questions throughout the webinar, and then at the end I'll ask Heather a couple of questions she can address at the end. So feel free to just type those questions in the questions section of the toolbar. As I said, I'll keep an eye, and then we'll ask Heather a couple questions at the end. When the webinar does end and I click end, you'll see an evaluation pop up. And that evaluation is about the webinar itself. It gives us feedback about how we did and what you appreciated about the topic and any other suggestions you might have. It only takes about 30 seconds to complete. So if you have 30 seconds, if you would be so kind as to fill out that evaluation at the end, that's really helpful for us. That's a continuing education requirement for Center for Change. That's completely anonymous. We compile the data and send that to the continuing education entities. And so if you would take just a minute to fill out that evaluation when it pops up at the end, that would be great. And then at about an hour or so after the webinar is finished, you'll receive a separate email from GoToWebinar with the link to take the online post-test. And as I said, you must take that post-test online and pass it. And when you do, then your certificate will automatically be downloaded to your computer. If you don't see the certificate, go to your download section on your computer. It might be there. Okay, I think that's it. So I'm going to turn the time over to Heather. Before I pop out, I'm going to send the presentation to Heather and make her the presenter. So here you go, Heather, coming your way.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay,
can you see it?
I can see it. It looks great, Heather, and I can hear you well. So I'm going to pop out so that you can't see me or hear me, but I'm still here if you need me. So just holler.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you Center for Change for having me. It's an honor to be here. Just want to introduce myself. Like Tamara said, my name is Dr. Heather Finley, and I had the pleasure and privilege of working for Center for Change in the past for several years, and now I am so lucky that they keep me around to do fun things like this. So super excited to share with you today a little bit about the gut-brain connection and how it applies to you and your patients. And this is just scraping the surface. This is a very complex topic and something that I have grown to love and be super passionate about. So hang on tight. We are in for a lot of information in the short time that we have together, but I'm excited that you're here. So before we get started, I would love it if you would just put your feet on the floor and breathe in for 4 seconds and hold that breath for 4 seconds. Then breathe out for 4 seconds and hold for 4 seconds. So we're going to do that one more time. Breathe in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Now out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is a technique that I use with my clients, and we are going to talk about why it's important and how deep breathing is extremely important for the gut-brain connection, and how your stress response is extremely important for this as well. So that was just as much for me as it was for you, and I am super excited to get started. So today we are going to talk about the physiology of normal digestion. We're going to talk a little bit about digestion under stress, implications for trauma. There's starting to be some research on this. We still need lots more, but I'll talk to you about what I know and what I've found. The nutrients that are impacted by gut dysbiosis and what gut dysbiosis even is, macronutrients and micronutrients and why these are important for the gut-brain connection, functional foods that are important, the RD role, and I don't think we're going to have time for a case study today, but maybe in the future, and we can talk about questions at the end. So you guys are all here likely because you're either interested in eating disorders, treating eating disorders, or currently are a clinician that does this in your practice. So I wanted to just scrape the surface a little bit. Some eating disorder behaviors and consequences. So we know from our clients that often caloric restriction is involved. Typically we see carbohydrate restriction, often restriction of high-fat foods. Sometimes we see over-exercise. We also may see use of laxatives or purging methods. And so your clients may check off one or all of these boxes, but we know that these are common things we see with eating disorders. And the result of these can be malnutrition, poor energy and fuel for their body, potentially impaired memory, hormone depletion, and GI complications. So I'm sure that many of you have had clients who complain of constipation, complain of stomach pain, and we're going to talk a lot about that today and some reasons why that might be. So I love this chart because the similarity between nutrient depletion and mood disorders is the exact same. So when a client is restricting calories, restricting carbohydrates, over-exercising, purging, whatever compensatory mechanisms they may be using as a result of their eating disorder, it can lead to nutrient depletion. And then we see these same things in mood disorders, whether that is anxiety, depression, or something else. So it's really important to take a step back when working with clients and just look at the gut and look at how they're actually absorbing and utilizing their nutrients. And when you start refeeding someone or you start incorporating more variety into their diet, you can truly make a huge difference in their mood and their brain. And it's amazing to see how this can play out with clients. So just briefly, stress and digestion. A stressed out gut is a stressed out brain. Your gut and your brain are connected through this pathway called the vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is a superhighway that communicates bidirectionally with your gut and your brain. So if your gut is stressed out, your brain is stressed out. So I'll use today for an example. If I was super nervous about giving this talk, I might be running to the bathroom right before this talk. We've all had an experience like that before, right? Maybe you are nervous about a speech you're giving. Maybe you are really upset because of a conversation you just had with someone. Maybe you, in the past, in your athletic endeavors, were really nervous before a track meet or something, and you found yourself having butterflies in your stomach and running to the bathroom. This is the perfect example of the gut-brain connection. Your mind is saying, I am stressed, I cannot worry about digesting food, get rid of it, or cramp up. And so we can see this on a smaller scale with our clients with a lot of the things that they experience, and we can utilize nutrition, mindfulness, and so many other things to help them with this. So in my experience and in the research, one of the #1 ways that we can improve digestive health is through stress management. So your adrenals are these little glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they are in control of cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and when your brain is stressed, it sends a message to the adrenal glands and says, pump out cortisol. Now, when your cortisol is high, that affects digestion, metabolism, and even your anxiety response. So if you think about this in the context of your clients, if they're constantly stressed out about trauma that they've had in the past, or even stressed out about food and sitting down to eat, and every time they eat, they're really stressed about how many calories are in that food, how is this going to affect me, is this going to make me fat, these things that they think when they're sitting down to eat a meal, and how that actually can impact their digestion. So as clinicians, we have the amazing and great job of helping clients to improve this by changing the way that they think about their food, changing the way in which they eat, and also changing the way that their thought process responds to this. So a healthy gut is a happy brain. Research shows that 90% of your serotonin, which is a mood stabilizer, is produced in your gut. So oftentimes we get into a situation, a chicken or egg situation. What happened first? Did the gut issues happen that caused the brain issue? Did the brain issue happen because of the gut issue? And it doesn't so much matter because we really need to focus on both. But it is helpful when you're working with clients to optimize this gut-brain connection because it can not only improve their digestion, but it can also improve their mood and their anxiety response. So I just want to go back to the basics. If you've ever taken anatomy and physiology, we're going to learn a little bit about digestion and how the process works in our body. So the process of digestion actually starts way before you ever even take a bite. You can think of a time where maybe you walk by a bakery, you smell something amazing, and you start salivating. That's the first step of digestion. Your saliva has enzymes and bacteria in it that help to break down food and help you to then utilize that food. So digestion begins when food enters the mouth and you start chewing. Your first stage of digestion once it enters your body is chewing, and chewing your food is a part of mechanical digestion. So this is the first place that you can help your clients in optimizing digestion, is getting them to chew. How often do we eat so quickly that we don't even remember eating, or we're distracted while we're eating? Your body can utilize the nutrients from your food a lot better if it's chewed and digested well. So after you chew and swallow, your food goes through your stomach and large intestines. Your food is denatured by hydrochloric acid, enzymes, and microbes that are in your small and large intestines. And this bacteria interacts with your food, and you have several pounds of bacteria in your intestines. And these bacteria eat up the food that you eat, especially fiber. So fiber being from whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, fruits, and vegetables. These good gut bugs, which we'll get into in a second, eat up this fiber and produce something called short-chain fatty acids. And I'm super excited about the research about short-chain fatty acids. I think we're just scraping the surface on this, but they're very powerful to the body. They're anti-inflammatory, they're amazing for brain health. They lower the pH of your stomach contents and keep away bad bacteria. So just to kind of briefly explain, if someone is restricting tons of carbohydrates and fiber from their diet, this is eventually going to affect their intestinal health as well as their brain health. So your intestines are, their primary function is absorption of nutrients and water. Your intestines also house your gut bacteria, both good and bad. Like I said, you have several pounds of good and bad gut bacteria. They help with electrolyte stability and also with neurotransmitter production. So the more good gut bacteria that you have, the more good neurotransmitters that you are going to be producing. I want to talk briefly about something called the migrating motor complex, and I wish I could see you all because I'd love to see how many people have heard of this before. I know as an RD, it's something that I never learned about in school. And once I did, I'm like, how did I not learn about this? It's so important. So we have something in our intestines called the migrating motor complex. And it's very fascinating to me how this works. But your migrating motor complex is kind of like the after office hours cleanup crew that comes in and vacuums and takes out the trash. This complex works at sweeping bacteria, food, etc., through the intestines so that you can have a bowel movement. So oftentimes when clients are maybe eating very frequently or have even large gaps in between their food, this migrating motor complex is not able to do its job. So maybe they're not committing to eating large meals because it's very anxiety producing for them to sit down and eat a meal, so they snack all day or they take little bites of things here and there, and then they complain of stomach pain. This migrating motor complex is activated 90 to 120 minutes after you eat a meal. And it can be extremely beneficial if you have clients that are struggling with constipation and complain of stomach pain. We have to get this cleanup crew to come in and do its job. And I'll talk more about this later, but just wanted to introduce this topic. So meal spacing really is important, and having that time in between meals for your body to rest and digest the food. So a little bit about a healthy gut and what that means. This picture right here is a picture I like that depicts a unhealthy gut and just what it could look like. So you'll see the blue mucosal layer. That is a protective layer. It's a barrier to prevent food and bacteria and anything else from getting to your epithelial lining of your gut, which is the purple part, causing inflammation. So when we have clients that maybe are not eating enough, over-exercising, have a very low fiber diet, whatever it might be, and their gut lining starts to weaken, they start having all of these stomach symptoms that are caused by this degradation of this mucosal layer. So a healthy gut looks like tons of good bacteria and lots of variety in that. Strong epithelial tight junctions. So the tight junctions are the parts in between the purple pieces on here. I wish I had a mouse to show you this, but it looks like it's not working. And this helps to protect you from any foreign invader or any pathogen that's going to cause any sort of inflammation in the gut. So what is dysbiosis? I think this has become a really hot topic and a hot term, but dysbiosis basically means a dysfunctional balance of good and bad bacteria. So when someone has dysbiosis, this basically means they have a low amount of bacterial diversity in their gut, so a low amount of good guys or good bacteria, too many prominent pathogenic organisms or bad bacteria, and there's lots of health issues that can be linked to low diversity. Antibiotics can be a part of this. When you take an antibiotic, it kills off not only the bad, but also the good. This is really hard to test for. We have not developed great technology to test for this. But some of the triggers for dysbiosis could be stress, too little sleep, exercise, too much or too little. Even the route of birth, they're linking this back to either C-section or vaginal delivery, early infant nourishment, either breastfeeding or formula fed, smoking. Those are just a few of the lifestyle triggers we know. Antibiotics obviously disrupts the gut bacteria balance. PPIs or proton pump inhibitors, antacids, steroids, birth control. And then from a diet perspective, a higher carbohydrate diet with lower amounts of fiber. Alcohol can be a dysbiosis trigger. And in someone with a very high level of inflammation in their gut, they may have a harder time digesting FODMAPs. And if there's any RDs here, you may be familiar with FODMAPs. If you aren't, what FODMAPs are is fermentable carbohydrates. So these are the carbohydrates that ferment in our gut and actually do help us to produce short-chain fatty acids like I was talking about earlier. So it's a catch-22 sometimes, because sometimes our patients have trouble digesting these things, but the things they have the trouble digesting are the things that are going to help them in the long run. So it's definitely a finite balance. FODMAPs can be found in gluten and wheat. They can be found in dairy and milk products. They're also found in garlic and onions and several other fruits and vegetables. So some symptoms of dysbiosis. Constipation could be a symptom of this, not enough good bacteria in the gut causing constipation, gas, and I'm not talking about just passing a little bit of wind after you eat a little bit of broccoli. This would be very painful, trapped gas where you just feel uncomfortable. Maybe your abdomen is really hard and distended, diarrhea, inflammation, immune dysfunction or getting sick frequently, an imbalance of neurotransmitter production, and these are the things that can cause it. So GI issues can definitely cause dysbiosis, and sometimes it's a chicken or egg scenario with this as well. So clients restricting a lot of the foods that cause them discomfort, and then it becomes a really vicious cycle of not eating enough of the things that they need to keep their gut intact, but then those things causing issues and them feeling really uncomfortable. So that's where the RDs can come in and help with this, as well as therapists to help with mindset and stress reduction, and we'll talk about that later. Dysbiosis can also cause mood disorders because, like I mentioned, the gut and brain are connected. So if your gut's mad, your brain is not going to be getting positive messages via the vagus nerve. Skin conditions, frequent illness, and then autoimmune disease. So this is another picture I like of the gut lining. So you'll see on the left-hand side, this is a picture of what a good, healthy gut lining would look like. So these microvilli, those are the finger-like projections on the top. That is what helps scoot food across your intestines. It helps absorb nutrients. It helps to improve your overall gut health. And then on the right-hand side, we have some damaged microvilli, which can lead to poor absorption of nutrients, damaged cell junctions. So you can see there, those cells are split apart. That's where food can leak through, bacteria can leak through, causing these inflammatory responses that sometimes can show up as maybe constipation or stomach pain or whatever it might be, which I know we've all heard from our patients before. So what is impacted when maybe your gut is damaged? Vitamins and minerals are impacted. If your gut is damaged and those microvilli cannot absorb nutrients, you can experience micronutrient deficiencies, and absorption issues can lead to a lot of different things down the road. Urolithins, these are produced by consuming foods that are high in polyphenols, things like berries, cherries, etc. They're very anti-inflammatory to the body. They're also antimicrobial. Lactate, which is a byproduct of fermentation. Your secretory IgA, which is a measure of your gut immune health. And then short-chain fatty acids like acetate, propionate, and butyrate, which I talked about earlier. So the byproducts of your good gut bugs eating fiber and then producing what's called short-chain fatty acids or postbiotics. So we have our prebiotics, which are our fiber, our probiotics, which are the good gut bugs, and the probiotics, good gut bugs, eat the prebiotics, the fiber, and produce postbiotics. That's kind of a mouthful, but they all go together and they're super important for overall gut health. So I want to talk a little bit about malabsorption. So when someone has damaged microvilli or a damaged gut, you do lose intestinal surface area. And this can, down the road, lead to small bowel disease, maybe celiac or Crohn's disease, short bowel, bacterial overgrowth, food allergies, infections, and, you know, at the very last, starvation. how many clients have you had, just think about, that have experienced any kind of gut issue after they have recovered? Maybe they've been restricting for years, they've been over-exercising for years, maybe they have a history of laxative abuse and now they're struggling with gastroparesis. So many things that we see correlate. And I know in my experience, I've seen so many clients that come to me during their recovery and now have a multitude of stomach issues. So the microbiome is a very hot topic right now, and I wanted to explain a little bit about that as well as give some definitions. So you have 100 trillion cells of bacteria that line the mucosal membranes of your mouth, your skin, and your gut. I think because the gut-brain axis is such a hot topic right now, we think that there's only bacteria in our gut, but we have bacteria all over our bodies that helps keep us healthy, and this is part of our microbiome. The microbiome is also important for neurotransmitter production, like serotonin and GABA, and as a result, when you have good, healthy gut bacteria, the bacteria in our gut can produce something called psychobiotics that impacts the brain. And it's a super fascinating topic. So just a little bit of a definition. I think most people are familiar with the microbiome. Your microbiome is a collection of genomes and from the microorganisms in the environment. Your microbiota are the specific microorganisms in a specific environment. So for example, your gut microbiota or your oral microbiota. I think oftentimes these words get confused and interchanged because most people don't know the difference, but now you do. So your microbiome is your collection of genomes, and then your microbiota is specific to the area we're talking about. So in this talk, we're mostly talking about the gut microbiota. So why do bacteria even matter? I love this little graphic because it shows how you can really have so many good guys in your gut crammed in there if you have a healthy gut. So bacteria matter because they support our immune system. They help to reduce inflammation in the gut. There's a particle in the gut called LPS, or lipopolysaccharide, that is inflammatory. And the more good bacteria you have, the less of LPS you have. Bacteria also help to enhance your nutrient absorption, and they also regulate digestive function, which who doesn't want that? So the gut-brain connection is extremely important because it helps us to produce serotonin as well as many other mood stabilizers. So I've talked a little bit about short-chain fatty acids, or postbiotics, which are also known as metabolic end products. There's lots of overlapping terms. But these are extremely important because they help to support our sympathetic nervous system. They do help to decrease stress and anxiety. They help to recreate serotonin. And these products truly do change your brain. So if we can help our clients to consume more variety in their diet, improve their digestive health, they truly can improve their mental health. So a little summary. Your good microbes in your gut, your good bacteria, are metabolic factories. They help to process all the food that we eat. They break food down. They produce vitamin K and butyrate, which are amazing for our brain and our body. And they also prevent neurodegeneration. So this is a topic for another day, but there's so much research on this and Alzheimer's and dementia prevention as well. So now on to the gut-brain axis, which is why most of you are here. So we have our autonomic nervous system, which contains both your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system. So your rest and digest and your fight or flight. This is responsible for things like digestion, your heart rate, respiratory rate, urination, sexual arousal, all things that we don't really think about doing. Our body just does it for us. And then we have our enteric nervous system, which is located in our gut. And this oversees the functions of the GI tract, like your neuroendocrine system, your microbiome, and your migrating motor complex, which I talked about before, the cleanup crew that comes in and whooshes fluid through to help clear out your intestines so you can have a bowel movement. So your enteric nervous system is also called your second brain. It can function on its own. It makes neurotransmitters, vitamins, it helps with your immune system, it helps to modulate permeability of the gut, and make short-chain fatty acids like I've talked about. And there are 5 phyla of bacteria and 30 to 40 species in the gut, or that you want in the gut. And the more diverse, the better. So I can't wait for more research to come out on this and how this relates to our patients. There's some research out and there's more to come, and how there are specific bacteria that actually do influence eating behavior, restriction, addiction, etc. And it's super fascinating. So the second brain has more neurons acting than anywhere else in the body. It helps to move smooth muscles. It also is responsible for the migrating motor complex, like I mentioned, and is a very important part of the gut-brain axis, and is also connected with your HPA axis. So your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis controls how your body responds to stress, whether this is physical stress or mental stress. Your body processes these the same, and this does impact your enteric nervous system. So what I've seen from the research and just anecdotally in my clients is chronic stress can and will lead to a gut imbalance, because like the example I gave earlier of being nervous for something or being stressed out about something, your body is not worried about digesting a meal if it's worried about being chased by a bear. So we really need to pay attention to the HPA axis when treating digestive disorders as well as eating disorders, because they all are connected and they all influence each other. So there's some research that has been coming out on trauma and the gut microbiome. And in my opinion, and what I've seen, is the microbiome really does need to be considered when treating trauma. So there's a couple studies out. Trauma and abuse have been reported in up to half of the adults with IBS, which is a prevalence of twice that of patients without trauma. So trauma does increase vulnerability of mental health symptoms as well as GI symptoms because of the gut-brain axis, which is very interesting. There's this study that was done on adoption, and it showed that 150 children that were adopted from orphanages or foster care on or before 2 years showed higher symptoms of GI symptoms, stomach aches, constipation, vomiting. And so we can relate maybe some of our patients' experiences as well as their current symptoms and behaviors, maybe even way back to childhood. If someone has had low bacterial diversity their whole life, been anxious their whole life because of things that happened in childhood, this is definitely something important to know. So this other study that was done from the sample of 8 participants, they were compared to 8 controls, which I know this is not a huge study. We definitely need more. I find it interesting and applicable, but they collected behavioral information, stool samples, and brain images. And the children with a history of early caregiving disruptions had distinctly different microbiomes from those that were raised by their biological parents. So when treating anything, whether it be eating disorders, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, the microbiome is a big part of this, and something that we all need to think about. So there are some animal studies also done that demonstrate dietary interventions, how probiotics can actually help with this, when the brain is developing and the microbiome is a little bit more flexible. But your microbiome in your gut the diversity is actually linked to the prefrontal cortex where your emotions are regulated. So I'll show you some research later on specific bacteria that influence the brain and influence the gut and how this applies to our patients as well. So this next study was out of UCLA, and they took a history of early life trauma and found that it was associated with structural functional brain changes, and it also did affect microbial composition. So we do know that trauma can affect the microbiome and affects the diversity of the gut, and I'm excited for more research to come out about this because I think it's only going to continue to grow. So this last thing that I'll share with you is individuals with PTSD had lower levels of bacteria that were associated with inflammation, immune function, brain function, and behavior. So again, going back to the gut-brain connection, anything that happens to the brain happens to the gut because they are connected via the gut-brain axis. So when we're looking at trauma, eating disorders, and the microbiome, how does this apply? So if their microbiome or gut microbiota is already vulnerable, these clients could already be susceptible to anxiety, depression, or IBS-related symptoms if they've had past trauma. This restrictive eating that we see often can further perpetuate the gut-brain axis because if they're restricting carbohydrates, if they're restricting fiber, if they're restricting micronutrients, under eating, which is a stress on the body, all of this affects the gut. And we know that this affects stomach acid, it can affect micronutrients, it will affect the diversity of the good gut bugs in the stomach, and it can be a really vicious cycle, a very much chicken or egg situation of like, where do I even start, what happened first, and how do I improve this? So just a little note about low stomach acid. I see this a lot in patients because restricting for a long time does alter stomach acid, and you need stomach acid to digest food and digest nutrients from your food. So in our patients that are complaining of stomach pain, nausea, bloating after meals, take a look at stomach acid. Sometimes this can actually be a really easy fix to help make them more comfortable and also help them to utilize the food that they're eating. If you're eating food and you can't digest it, then it's not doing as much for you if you actually can digest and utilize the food. So I kind of already talked about this, but just to reiterate, we really do need to put all this together when we're treating our patients, considering the microbiome, considering the mind, considering stress about food and how this applies to our patients. Because stress is stress to the body. So whether it is a past trauma, whether it is stress about sitting down and eating a meal, your body knows stress the same. So some simple things that you can do to help your patients optimize their gut-brain connection are exactly what I did at the beginning of this. Get them to practice calming down before a meal, reducing their stress response, maybe writing out gratitude or affirmations before they eat, because if they're going into a meal stressed, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? How many times have we heard our patients say, this food hurts my stomach, and then they don't want to eat it anymore? But if they can reduce their stress response and improve their digestion just by taking a couple deep breaths, it can really make a difference. So stress can be physical and emotional, it could be environmental, could be from excessive exercise, or even from under eating. There's so many things that can cause stress to the body. So specific to disordered eating, when your HPA axis is stimulated, like I mentioned earlier, your body and your adrenal glands secrete cortisol. This revs up the immune system, it increases cytokines, and also increases inflammation. This increases gut permeability, or the flow of bacteria through the gut, causing more inflammation, and it impacts serotonin production. So reducing stress response, extremely important when we're working with our patients. You can see it on this picture here. So just another visual. On the left-hand side, this is normal gut physiology. The gut and the brain are connected and communicating with each other well. The brain isn't amping up any sort of stress hormone, causing any sort of imbalance in the gut. On the right-hand side, we can see that there's a visceral response, very stressed out response, and there's lower amounts of neurotransmitters, there's pro-inflammatory cytokines, and overgrowth or dysbiotic bacteria that are affecting the gut. So really, the treatment of our patients involves calming down the brain, reducing stress, as well as also improving digestion so our patients can utilize this food. So I mentioned this earlier, but the vagus nerve is extremely important. Your vagus nerve is the phone line between the gut and the brain. So I see this all the time with my patients. They have very poor gut motility, and what I mean by that is the poor movement of food and waste through their digestive tract. So the brain, the vagus nerve, and the gut are truly the three best friends that anyone can have, because if they're working in sync with each other, things are flowing a lot better. If they're not, then we have major problems. So one of the major things that can impact the vagus nerve is stress, as well as undereating is another one. And the vagus nerve innervates the gut to contract so that our patients can have a bowel movement. The vagus nerve is also connected with the migrating motor complex that I mentioned earlier. So when you have poor vagal tone or poor vagal output, however you want to say it, it does affect the constipation that we see oftentimes in our clients. It affects gut motility, it affects bacterial balance, and it truly does impact the comfortability of our clients as well. Okay, so stress, like I mentioned, will decrease vagal tone. So how many of your clients have complained of stomach pain, constipation, or bloat? Probably all of them or most of them. This is very common. They are extremely anxious, extremely stressed, and because of that, their vagus nerve is not communicating with their gut, and their food is not being digested and absorbed as it should. And then it becomes this super vicious cycle. Food is sitting in their digestive tract, it's not moving through, it's more likely to cause bacterial overgrowth that we don't want, and then it makes them more anxious because that is being cycled back to the brain via the vagus nerve. So poor vagal tone can result in inflammation, heart rate variability, poor digestive function, poor mood, and poor immune function as well. The vagus nerve is also correlated and important for BDNF, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor. This is like Miracle-Gro to the brain. It only works in a relaxed and reduced stress state, and it helps to regenerate nerves in the brain. And like I mentioned earlier, the vagus nerve is the main road that communicates this information from the microbiome, and we need this information to go back to the brain to produce BDNF and reduce inflammation in the brain, and to help our patients with mood. So here's just a little chart. BDNF in the hippocampus is important for depression and anxiety, and if it's low, it can result in more depression and anxiety. And increased BDNF is what happens with anti-anxiety medications. Elevated BDNF in the hippocampus is the impact of that is increased exploratory behavior, and then reduced BDNF and amygdala is the impact of that is reduced anxiety. So we need this vagus nerve to work for us, not against us, to help to produce BDNF, and our microbiome influences this. The bacteria in our microbiome, which is also influenced by digestion and absorption. So just to recap, digestion under stress. So when your body is in a sympathetic state, so fight or flight, this reduces the amount of good bacteria. Stress management is extremely crucial for optimizing the microbiome. This can also lead to deficiencies. Low hydrochloric acid in the stomach can lead to B12 deficiency, and can then further perpetuate anxiety. So poor digestion will lead to more bloating. It can lead to more inflammation in the gut, and as we've talked about, it can be this super vicious cycle. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the importance of gut diversity. So with greater gut diversity, the body is able to do its job and protect itself. So individuals with disease more than likely have a decreased diversity in their gut, and we can improve our resilience as well as our health by improving diversity in our gut. So I want to talk a little bit about gut diversity and IBS. Maybe many of your patients have IBS or symptoms of IBS, but just real quick, antidepressants are actually used in the treatment of IBS. So again, the perfect example of the gut-brain connection. So when you put a patient on SSRIs, it actually does impact motility and can improve anxiety and depression as well. So sometimes when our patients go on antidepressants for depression, it actually does improve their digestion as well, which can be helpful in relieving the constipation that is making them so uncomfortable, and reinforcing that behavior of maybe not wanting to eat or not wanting to increase diversity in what they're eating. So this is a chart from a study that's linked here, just showing all the different influences on diversity of gut bacteria. So genetics, stress, physiological processes all impact this on the right-hand side, but then external things influence it as well. So diet, prebiotics, probiotics, antibiotic usage, lifestyle, and even living environment can greatly impact the diversity of gut bacteria. So sometimes I think patients feel like I'm just doomed. I'm going to have stomach pain or anxiety for the rest of my life. You know, this was my destiny, but maybe they're genetically prone to have these things, but we can maybe greatly improve these symptoms by optimizing the gut-brain connection and optimizing the gut microbiota. So a little bit about bacteria and mood. So the gut is the enteric nervous system, like I mentioned earlier, and then we have our autonomic nervous system, and these are very important for mental health. They are very important to work together, and there are different bacteria that influence mood and influence the communication of these systems. So 90% of the body's serotonin is created in the gut, and 50% of dopamine. The gut also manufactures 30 other neurotransmitters, and they act the same way that they do in the brain. So sometimes people will say that the gut is the second brain, also nature's Prozac. So probiotics will exhibit direct effects on the GI tract, but they also affect the brain. And I'm going to show you a picture of some charts and research on specific probiotics. But We need probiotics in our gut. Those are the live living organisms because they help us to better absorb and digest our food. And like I've said before, they affect our skin, our joints, our brain, and our immunity, and can definitely improve this gut-brain connection. So prebiotics, like I mentioned, are the fiber that the probiotics eat. So just working on including more fiber in our clients' diets can truly improve the diversity of their gut. So there's a class of bacteria called bifidobacteria, and these are extremely important for mood, and they also are extremely important for constipation. And these probiotics in our gut eat fiber that help to promote greater diversity of this class of bifidobacteria, as well as produce other anti-inflammatory compounds that are extremely important for the health of our gut as well as our brain. So probiotics, the good bacteria, mixed with prebiotics, help to encourage a symbiotic and synergistic relationship. Oftentimes I have clients or practitioners or whoever ask me, well, what probiotic do I need to take to improve whatever the condition is? And my response is always, you have to match the probiotic to the condition because they are strain specific, but it's silly to introduce a probiotic if your diet is not high in fiber to support that, because just like we need food to survive, probiotics do as well. So it's actually more important, in my opinion, to focus on getting higher fiber prebiotics in the diet to support the growth of beneficial bacteria in the gut to help with mood. So food provides the nourishment, but a stressed out gut cannot utilize this nourishment, which is why the gut-brain connection is so extremely important. So if you have a balanced nervous system through managing stress, reducing anxiety, your body can support healthy hormones, optimize digestion, and I put perfect in quotes because I don't believe there's a perfect diet, but even a perfect diet, whatever that means, can be unsuccessful if your mind is overworked and the body can't utilize this nourishment. So we will hinder our digestive enzyme secretion and sterilize our gut microbiome if we're constantly stressed. So you'll notice a theme here. To optimize the gut-brain connection, we first need to work on stress. This is a little chart. You might want to screen grab this, or maybe you have the slides, but these are the specific probiotics that are responsible for some of the common neurotransmitters that we need for mood. You'll see lactobacillus there a lot. That's one that most people are familiar with, as well as bifidobacteria. This is a screenshot of a paper that I was involved in my doctorate program, where we dug into all the research on probiotics and sectioned it out by disease state. So we had 7 papers that covered all these different health conditions. So this one is from the mental health section that looks at all the research on mental health, neurotransmitters, and stress. And you can see in the middle of the page the different commercial products that are available with the specific strains that have been studied for mood. So pretty fascinating. And then this next slide is actually looking at food sources of probiotics. So like I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily think that everyone needs to take a probiotic to have a healthy gut. We can get a lot of probiotics from the food that we eat. So pickled and fermented foods can be a great way to improve the health of our gut as well as our patients' guts, and not have to be taking a million pills, and improve that gut-brain connection. Here's another screenshot from that same paper that looks at the different strains as well as some of the health concerns. So I want to talk a little bit about fermentation. I think this has become a really hot topic recently. When you ferment a food, it becomes probiotic. And lacto-fermented foods help to provide the body with beneficial bacteria to help fight off any bad bacteria that might be in the intestine affecting this gut-brain connection or digestion. So these bacteria do help us with digestion. They also help with synthesizing vitamins that are necessary and help with GABA expression and production. Consuming fiber is another great way to help to optimize the gut-brain connection and something we can work with our clients on. Fiber is helpful for insulin sensitivity. Our gut microbes need fiber to survive. We find fiber in so many different foods, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, fruits and vegetables. And something I always tell my clients is the gut bugs that prefer kale are extremely different from the gut bugs that prefer beans. So variety really is key. The more variety we can help our clients include in their diet, and the more we can reduce stress around restricting their intake or restricting large food groups, the greater bacterial diversity they're going to have in their guts. So I know we're getting close on time, but real quick, there is research on specific strains, Lactobacillus helvectis, RO52, and Bifidobacterium longum, that help with this HPA axis stress response, and is super fascinating and something that we can use to help with the gut-brain connection. VSL3 is a probiotic that is available on the market to help with BDNF expression, and ingestion of lactobacillus through things like yogurt help with emotional behavior, central GABA receptor expression, and are helpful for the vagus nerve. So if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, you can start looking at all the different probiotic strains and how they influence other neurotransmitters. But to start, here are some things we can encourage our clients to include to help with enzymes and to help with digestion. So all these foods, green papaya, pineapple, ginger, asparagus, any raw foods, soaked and sprouted foods help to increase digestibility. All these things are extremely important in improving gut health and therefore improving brain health. So as an RD, part of our role is to assess for early childhood food patterns. How were they fed as a child, and how did this affect the development of their microbiome over time? Assess their current dietary intake. Are they restricting large food groups like carbohydrates and not getting any fiber, therefore contributing to this gut-brain issue? Do they have access to food? Do they have variety in their diet? And help to enable these clients to fill in the gaps and encourage variety very slowly, but this will over time help to improve the function of the gut as well as the gut-brain connection. We also help with weight restoration and vitals, which we know that weight restoration is going to improve digestive function and also improves brain function. We want to assess for adequate digestion and absorption. So just looking at stomach acid levels, looking at the ability to digest and absorb food. Something going on. Evaluating the gut-brain connection. How is their stress impacting their digestion? Are they sitting down to eat very stressed out every time they sit down to have a meal? Are they mindfully eating? Are they chewing their food really well? Help them to reduce their fear of food and to reduce their stress around food. And then helping the patient in simple lifestyle practices. So slowly increase fiber. The one caveat to this is if a client is severely constipated, you do not want to throw more fiber at them. It is going to make them miserable. So definitely address the constipation before throwing fiber at them. Encourage some fermented foods. This is a great way to get probiotics in the diet without having to take a pill. Use herbs, adjust for sensitivities if needed, lots of variety, lots of color, including omega-3s to help with their brain, which will then help with their gut. So things like salmon and fatty fish that can help with the omega-3 levels. Focusing on making sure they're getting plenty of the macronutrients that are extremely important for energy, mood, and blood sugar regulation. And then also making sure that they're getting the micronutrients. If they're not digesting and absorbing their food, they could be deficient in some of these things. Zinc, you'll see, is extremely helpful for serotonin production. Magnesium, extremely important as well. So looking at digestion and absorption can be helpful in our patients' digestion, as well as their brain health and the overall gut-brain connection. Chromium, selenium, calcium, all these things extremely important for the function of their body and food, which I don't have time to get into. But if we're looking at their overall diet, how can we include more variety so that they're getting more of what they need in their day, and they're getting more of what, more variety to help support a more well-balanced microbiome. Omega-3s, like I mentioned, anti-inflammatory. They help with brain inflammation, and there is some research that suggests that it helps with serotonin reception, which then, as a result, would help with motility and digestive function. In assessing for food access, use frozen vegetables if needed, teach to grow herbs on a windowsill, but really most importantly, variety, variety, variety. Ask them how they can switch up what they're eating, and this will improve the overall microbial balance in their gut. As far as aiding digestion, helping them to eat and allow the process to flow as intended, trying to allow 3 hours at least in between meals, unless they're refeeding, that's not appropriate, but to improve their constipation and improve digestion for that migrating motor complex to work. Trying to consume liquids surrounding their meals to not dilute the stomach acid. Room temperature liquids can help with this. And then most of all, encouraging 20 minutes to eat and adequate chewing. Like I mentioned at the beginning, chewing is the first step of digestion, and helping our patients to be mindful of this to improve their digestion and improve their overall gut health. So to wrap up, I know you guys probably have patients and things to do. Thanks for hanging with me. But to sum it all up, the gut-brain connection is very crucial in treating eating disorders and mood disorders. As you can see, our stress response is connected with our gut, and our gut is connected with our stress response. So we can make small mindful shifts in our diet by including more variety, including more fiber, including more fermented foods, as well as focusing on some of the basic eating habits and behaviors like chewing really well and taking 20 minutes to eat to help improve digestion. Gut disorders are very common with eating disorders because of this connection. And we also need to pay attention to past trauma and stress and any mood disorders that may have an impact on this connection, and address as needed. So thank you guys so much for attending and hanging with me, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tamara.
Hi, Heather. Thank you. We have so many questions that actually, let me get out of this a little bit. Hang on a second.
Okay.
My apologies. There we go. Close. There we go. We have so many questions that that I actually sent in the chat to everyone your contact information, so that you can they can reach out to you directly if they have a burning question that wasn't addressed by the time you got to the end. I will bring up one quick thing, even though we're past the top of the hour. There were a lot of questions about intermittent fasting and how that plays into all that you just talked about. That's probably a webinar an hour long, I would guess. But if you can give us a little bit short answer about how, if, and especially in terms of eating disorder patients, how that all combines with intermittent fasting and how that's so hot right now, your thoughts about that.
That's a great question. I'm glad that so many of you asked it, because I get asked that at least once a week. So I'm not a fan of intermittent fasting for multiple reasons. One is that extended periods of fasting affects your stomach acid levels. And when you have low stomach acid levels, this affects your nutrient absorption, as you guys learned today. So extended fasting can eventually impact other things down the road if you're not digesting and absorbing your food very well. The body, we do know that the digestive tract functions well with periods of fasting, but not intermittent fasting where it's 16 hours off, 8 hours on, or whatever the schedule is. We do know that fasting in between meals is helpful. So like I mentioned with the migrating motor complex, allowing like 3 hours in between meals can be really helpful in improving constipation and improving digestion, because that migrating motor complex can go in and blow fluid through and get things cleared out, and it can greatly improve the overall health of our digestive tract and in our patients. So no, I don't think you need to intermittent fast for this. I do think that it's helpful to have that time in between meals. I know a lot of my clients, probably just like yours, will eat small meals because a large meal and feeling full is very, very triggering for them. So this might be something that you work on over 6 months, you know, working on spacing out the meals. I don't think it would be a good idea to go and say, okay, I know we talked about this, but now we're going to try to have 3 hours in between meals, even though you've been having an hour. Maybe just work on one at a time. So can we have 3 hours in between breakfast and a snack, or breakfast and lunch, depending on their schedule, if they're really struggling with constipation or any sort of digestive discomfort. And then also, as a caveat to that, assessing for stomach acid levels, because in my experience, most clients already have low stomach acid levels. So if you encourage them to, you know, do a 16-hour fast, it's going to make that problem worse, leading to more nausea and more stomach pain and all of that. So I hope that helps.
That was great. Thank you. Just so everyone knows, we had so many questions and so much positive feedback. We'll have Dr. Finley back. I've kept track of all of the questions, and I'll send those to her, and we'll see if we can put together another webinar that addresses more of those things as well. So thanks so much to Heather. And, you know, personally, I've known Heather for a while, and she's was on my team at Center for Change. So it thrills me to have her still be connected to us and part of us and willing to present on behalf of the center today. And again, we'll have her back, I promise. So I'll end the webinar here shortly. Just 2 quick things. When I click exit, you'll see an evaluation pop up. As a reminder, this is an evaluation of the webinar itself. It's a continuing education requirement for us. It's completely anonymous. We gather the data anonymously and then have to send it to our continuing education entities. So if you would take 30 seconds to fill out that evaluation when it pops up at the end here in just a minute, that would be really helpful. And then about an hour from now, after we're all finished here, about an hour from now, you'll receive an email directly from GoToWebinar with the link to take the post-test online. You must take the post-test online and pass in order to receive continuing education credit. And once you pass, your certificate will be automatically downloaded to your computer. So if you don't see it on your screen, go to your downloads folder and it should be there. Thanks again for joining us today. We hope we'll see you again another time soon. My thanks again to Dr. Finley. Take care, everybody. Be well.